eyes may be able to see, but without a heart, you cannot feel.
What's up, everybody? This is Jorcio Samos, and you are tuning into episode 90 of the It Will Come show. And today I'm going to be talking about how I confuse work ethic with workaholism and what I'm actually doing about it. So this is a bit of a personal one. So let's get into it. So this episode was actually inspired by a member of our pack. So if you've been following along this show, we do have this productivity accelerator and accountability group called the pack. You can learn more about it with the URL in the lower right, jointhepack.co. And from our member, I've hidden her name, to respect her privacy. Have you done an IWC episode on the American work ethic, going back to work despite corona risks? Could link in with your own upcoming holiday and realizations around workaholism. By the way, here's a post on Tony Robbins' site. I will include the link that was shared here in the show notes after. But thank you to our Paxter who did inspire this episode. So today I'm actually going to be covering the following. So what is workaholism? The difference between work ethic and workaholism, my story, what I'm doing, and then the road to recovery. So first up, what is workaholism? It is a compulsion to work excessively hard and long hours. Example, a culture where materialism and workaholism are rampant. So first up, identifying the problem, right? I think this is half of the battle. A lot of people who are generally, ambitious, seeking success, looking to get ahead, they will generally fall into any one of these. As you can see here, if you are working through your lunch every day, being the first person to arrive to work and the last person to leave, checking work-related email while on vacation, taking on more responsibilities than one can manage. And as I'm going through these, please feel free to see if these apply to you or not as well. Canceling a night out with friends to catch up on work, coming to work when sick instead of taking a sick day, taking less than the allotted number of vacation days, checking work-related emails after normal work hours. I fall into all of these categories. And this was kind of alarming when I checked it out. Because generally, for a lot of us who do work hard, we actually glorify a lot of these things, right? Be the hardest worker in the room, especially the one of being the first person to arrive and the last person to leave, right? So here are also some really interesting statistics, right? 1 in 31 Americans worked 60 plus hours a week last year. 200 more hours per person were worked annually compared to 1970. And this is an interesting one, right? Because if we think about it, all the technology and all these improvements and efficiencies are supposed to help free time up for ourselves. But we've just found more things to make ourselves busy. Next. No one ever died of hard work. There is a word in Japan, karoshi, meaning death from overwork, estimated to cause around 100,000 deaths per year and almost 5% of Japan's stroke and heart attack deaths in employees below 60. Yeah, I definitely witnessed a lot of this in Japan and Korea. And it's funny how it's embedded into the culture as well. Factors of risk. Between the factors of risk that drive to this addiction can be the economic pressures familiar, the fear of losing work, strong need to achieve success in desired positions, the excessive ambition for power, money, and prestige, the inability to set priorities, lack of personal feelings that are supplemented with the job. So, the differences between work ethic and workaholism, right? This is something that after I realized I was a workaholic, mistaking what I thought, was work ethic through hard work and then simply just being addicted to it. So there's a quote here from Oprah Winfrey. What I know is that if you do work that you love and the work fulfills you, the rest will come. Right? And of course, the show is It Will Come. I often say through patience and persistence, it will come, right? And this definitely applies. And so that sounds great. And then down below, though, you have quotes like so. Work ethic is the most important component of being successful. And then Gary Vaynerchuk, who's known to be very outspoken about hustle, right? Which is a very American thing, the hustle culture. Stop whining, start hustling. So you can see sort of this tension between the two. And this tension is definitely present within myself and many others, I think, who are used to working long hours, working all the time. And essentially, this tension is what you end up having or seeing, right? Or experiencing. So on the right, this is me. I love what I do. I love all of the things that I've been, putting out and the choices I've made, and I do love what I do. But then why am I still experiencing the left side, right? Which is burnout. And this seems to be a very common thing for me throughout my working years. So it's really, really, really interesting to reflect on such things during COVID-19. COVID-19 has really forced me, and I know many other people, to look at like, okay, the old normal, right? Is what we were doing from a work standpoint, from everything. Is it still what we want to be doing when we come out of this? So just a little bit on my story as well. So, and then I'm going to be talking about at least my when I started working or getting into the workforce. So, the very early days, just out of university, I actually, well, at the end of my university period, so for my master's, I had actually created this animated series called Tales from None Mail. So, if you didn't know, back in the day, I was both an animator and a developer, programmer. So I decided I wanted to, sort of combine those two technical and creative fields, and then I somehow managed to make a name for myself as a cultural animator, right? So the and also backdrop, when I was in high school, middle school, I wouldn't consider myself the hardest worker in the room. I was okay, definitely felt a lot of guilt not getting all A's. Well, at least not until I hit my senior year. There was a lot of sort of enjoying myself, right, and not taking myself too seriously. So the work ethic, I think, came more as I got older. And so, yeah, my first sort of foray into the world of, marketing, promotions, and entrepreneurship actually came as a result of me looking to promote my animated series. It was a great time, and because I also got labeled a key person of influence by Adobe themselves, and the project, we ended up getting a lifetime subscription to Adobe as a result of doing that. So that was a really fascinating starting point. But during this time, my parents also went through a divorce, and the family, started to split. And family was a very big part of my belief system. I believe that family was everything, and that family should always stick together. And then what was happening was that the family broke apart. I ended up becoming, I guess, the dad of the family, and that, I think, definitely took a toll. So the work ethic definitely started to increase almost exponentially from around there. And this is upon reflection. Sadly, during this time, I also did get married. We were actually together for about 10 years, and it eventually led to a divorce. Now, I don't know if it was me working a lot that was well, it definitely wasn't the main factor, but I think it definitely was a part of it as well. Because, looking back, what it meant was that my attention wasn't always on the relationship. Um, I definitely loved her, but the attention wasn't always there. And so this was, I guess, a hard realization to come to and to admit to myself, because I think from when the family split apart, I think I felt like I needed to prove myself. And I'll speak more about this later on in terms of the actual realizations. But family went through a divorce, and then I eventually went through a divorce. During this time, I also created the pack, which I mentioned earlier on. This was actually a way of um, dealing with my own problems in between jobs, right? So I was solving my own problem around, how do I stay motivated while I'm on the hunt for my next job? And so I ended up creating this accountability group, which has taken on a life of its own, right? I was dealing with something called lone wolf syndrome. And so that's what we call people who end up being attracted to this group. We help heal lone wolf syndrome, which is present amongst a lot of professionals and entrepreneurs. Then, fast forward a few years as well, I ended up creating a new company in Singapore called Faya, who are also sponsors of this show. And the company is geared around consulting, to do with building communities and also integrating new and emerging technologies. So that, amongst many other projects and ventures, I didn't list all of them, essentially is a quick rundown of how I got to where I am now in the context of workaholism. And so it was really alarming when actually one of our Paxters, who's been in the group since day one, said to me that for as long as she's known me, she's never witnessed me take an intentional break over the past 4.5 years. Now that was kind of interesting because I thought I did at least somewhere along the lines, but when I look back, I always combined a holiday with work, and so I never really had intentional time off, whereby I wasn't looking at my emails or doing some sort of things work related because I justify it as I love what I do, and so I didn't look at work-life balance. I looked at work-life integration. And so, I think the hard realization was, I actually did become addicted to my work. And how I knew this was when, I realized I could not switch off. I actually felt anxiety. And I'm someone who doesn't like to complain a lot, but, to sort of admit or even use these words right now is difficult or uncomfortable. But I think once I did realize that I fell under that category, I started to change some things. And so, yeah, I think the ultimate realization, and I haven't spoken much about this, and I think everybody, if we're honest with ourselves, a lot of our problems stem from our childhood, right? And often when dealing with issues, we might be advised to, don't worry about the past. The past doesn't matter. Just look forward and focus on the future. This can be good advice, but it's incomplete. Because there's another piece of advice about how the further you look into your past, the further you can create a more compelling or brighter future, right? Because there are patterns from our past that if we have the courage to look back at it honestly, we can start to heal and repair those things on our own. And so here, this is actually a picture of my father. And so my father and I haven't really had a very strong relationship for a good number of years since the divorce. But then when I look back, I realized, he actually was quite absent from family dealings growing up. And, because he worked a lot. And he was definitely known as the career guy, the work guy. And, the traditional role was the father goes out to work, mother stays home and looks after the kids. And that definitely played out. But what was interesting is when looking back, you start to see how, there are not that many memories, or at least I blocked it out of him being there. And so that was, one half of what made me between my parents. And so there was a lot of resistance and blockage around that. And I realized that a lot of what I did stemmed around trying to prove something. Now, I thought I was just trying to prove it to myself, but I realized it was probably trying to prove to him that I wasn't, what's the word? That I was worthy, right? Because as I mentioned, I wasn't getting good grades and stuff up until maybe my senior year, and I guess a lot of that went into my subconscious. And so, to realize that I ended up becoming like my father, that was harsh, because my father was known to just work all the time. And I realized I was doing the same thing. And it's funny when you realize that the things that you might not like about your parents, when you tell yourself, I'm never going to be like that, or I'm not going to do that, you end up manifesting that into existence simply by the act of saying, I'm not going to be like that. Because in order to not be like something, that something has to exist, right? So, yeah, that was, I think the ultimate realization that this was learned behavior. And so I ended up justifying it as something normal and then trying to prove something. And I realized that there is nothing to prove, right? So there was a lot of sort of gunk that I had to get rid of and confront and face. because I realized it was not something I wanted to take with me into this next phase of my life. And so as a result, I then kind of did a very quick turnaround, and these are the things that I'm actually going to be doing. So as of tomorrow, I have taken my first. I'm taking my first official break since 4.5 years ago, and it's so here are the steps, or here are the points. So I'm taking 1 week off. I've notified all my clients. I've informed my team. I've set up processes for while I'm away. I realized I didn't spend enough time on my processes. I set up an email autoresponder, very basic. I delegated inbox management to a VA. I didn't do this before. I had the option to do it this entire time, but I was afraid to let go of control. And so, realizing that as well, you go, what are you afraid of? It's not like I'm dealing with Hillary Clinton communications or something. But finally did that. And then 7, set up a few small projects for while I'm off. And this is more related to self-care. Now, the road to recovery. So what I've shared with you are my tips, or what I'm doing, but there's definitely a lot of resources out on the web to help you if you've identified yourself as a workaholic as a result of watching this video. And it's I never thought I'd be saying that or defining myself as a workaholic, but here I am. And so there's a 12-step road to recovery infographic. I'll try and include a link in the show notes as well, but feel free to just search it on the web as well on Google, and you should find the 12 steps. But a lot of that that's there, I'm actually following along and walking down my own recovery road. There's also another book. I think there's an audiobook version of this as well called Chained to the Desk, and it is a guidebook for workaholics, right? And so this is something that definitely needs to be addressed because I don't think it's talked about enough. And I think we need to understand the difference between a good, strong, hard work ethic, but also workaholism. And this is the thing, yin and yang, harmony, right? Sometimes there can be a fine line that just flips you over. And I think that's a never-ending practice and exercise in learning to understand. So finally, I have this quote: workaholics aren't heroes. They don't save the day, they use it up. The real hero is already home because she figured out a faster way to get things done. And, I couldn't agree more, at least at this point in time, because if you think about it, right, we are, the reason why we are more efficient is because we want to try and find faster ways of getting things done to free up more time. Now, if that was the goal, where is all the time gone, right? And so if we are addicted to just being busy, then clearly there's an issue. And so I, challenge you to look at your own sort of work life, your work environment, and see if you are suffering from workaholism, and see if you can change anything as we go through this COVID-19 period and emerge out of it better than before. Because it now is a time to slow down and reflect. And, there's also a lot of opportunity. So, of course, yours truly is still working on some things in the background. But there's nothing stopping us from taking time out, right? And there's a video or a class that I'm watching on masterclass.com, and it's the latest one with I think a U.S. historian who looks at sort of like the leadership traits of some of the best U.S. presidents in her opinion. And one of them, which was really interesting, is that some of the best U.S. presidents of the past actually highly prized their vacation time or their away time. And so when they would go out into nature, and they would just, pretty much shut themselves off from everything and anything. And you can imagine U.S. presidents, they've got a lot of stuff that they have to sort of deal with and are responsible for. And so if they can make that time, why can't we? So what are your thoughts, right? Is today's topic something you identified with? Or have you dealt with workaholism yourself? Would love to know. Please share your thoughts in the comments box below. And remember to like and subscribe. And as always, remember, through patience and persistence, it will come.
The eyes may be able to see, but without a heart, you cannot feel.